This week on the MatchKitCast, we have Sarah Ferguson. No, she's not a shamed royal. She's an endurance swimmer from South Africa, and she has an incredible story of how she transitioned her career from conventional swimming in a pool to ocean swimming and making a difference to the environment as a result.
I'm Sarah Ferguson. I swim for a cause. I swim for my faith. I swim for the ocean.
Hi Sarah, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Ben.
Now the sport is swimming, Sarah. We won't get into all your achievements just yet. It's very clear that this is a sport that you loved from the beginning, so much so that you have done so much within the sport itself. How did it all begin for you though?
I think it began when I was little. I was in the water before I could walk. I grew up in Johannesburg, so away from the ocean. But when we came to Durban on holidays, my mom used to run after me when I was crawling to the sea before I could even walk. So I've always loved the ocean. I've always loved water. My mom and dad took me for swimming lessons when I was little, and then in primary school I used to win all my races. And then when I was in standard 5, which is grade 7, I won the Victrix Adorum at school. And I think my parents realized then I had quite a talent, and so they enrolled me in a proper swimming squad. And then I started swimming competitively, but I actually hated the competition, so I stopped competing, but I loved the training, so I would just train. And then for 2 years I kind of did not very much competition except for schools, and then moved coaches in 1997. And under that coach Brian Button, I started competing again and set very high goals for myself. So yeah, that's kind of where it all began in terms of swimming. My ocean swimming career only started much later. So I finished competitive pool swimming in 2009. I retired from that officially. Spent some time traveling the world. And then in Hawaii, where I was traveling, I fell in love with the ocean, which is a good place to fall in love with the ocean because it's full of marine life, and it's a beautiful place to be. And I saw my first turtle there. I swam with dolphins there. And that's where my ocean swimming career kind of started. So yeah, that's a brief summary of how it all started. And
something I've always found quite remarkable about swimmers is that when you're training for other sports, whether it be running or cycling, or if you're in a team sport, it's quite social. Swimming for me seems particularly difficult because you're in the water and you are essentially looking at a line at the bottom of the pool. You're going up and down. Like obviously, depending on your stroke, there's different disciplines, different sort of focus points. But like, how difficult was it to always stay motivated in that sort of space? Is the social aspect something that made swimming harder for you, or was it just something that you kind of just zoned into and it became normal?
I think for me I had a very active social life outside of swimming. So it was an escape for me. It was a place where I was alone with my thoughts. I could focus and just be fully present in the moment. And I think that's what you find most swimmers they love about the sport, is that it's a time out from the world where you're fully present in what you're doing. And a lot of people think, yes, you're just looking at a black line, but there's so much that you think about. Swimmers are actually very good at maths because we do maths all the time, looking at our sets and our times and working on percentage of maxes and all of those things. So there's actually a lot to concentrate on there. It's not as monotonous as people seem to think. But I spent lots more time looking at the ceiling than the back line because I was a backstroker. But yeah, there's a lot to think about. So for me, it wasn't ever a challenge. It was something that I craved and I thrived in, and I loved that just time out and that time of pushing my body and testing boundaries and that. Yeah, it was a good time for me. I had my social outside of that, and I had that nice balance.
It's a fascinating insight because for a lot of people, sport becomes so all-consuming. But at least you say, like, you've got your life out there, and your sport was a bit of an escape and a bit of a contrast from that. But to go into the whole thing about focus and obviously having that sort of laser idea towards what you're doing and your mind going, ocean swimming. Now, if I just look at some of your achievements here, the pure geography of what you've done here, you're the first person to swim a 100-kilometer stage swim from along the elephant coast of KZN to Mozambique. First person to swim from Scottsboro to High Rocks Beach across Aliwal Shoal, and first African woman to swim the Kaiwi Channel. And then your big world record, you're the first person to swim around Easter Island. Now, Easter Island, that swim was roughly 64 kilometers. The person before that who tried to do it gave up after about 25, 26 hours. You managed it in 19 hours. Now, Sarah, I get endurance sport, right? There's a lot of training that goes into it. There's a lot of focus, a lot of determination. But this is a very, very long time to be in a state which is not natural for humans. I mean, you're in water. You've changed species in this respect. I've got to start with, how do you prepare for such a thing? How do you focus on such things? And where does the inspiration come to actually just have these goals and projects? Because this is the thing. It's like, it's not so much a race. It's massive amounts of geography. It's a project in itself. There's logistics here that we'll never understand. So I think, to try to simplify this question, which I'm doing terribly at, where did it start that you wanted to kind of go so far, so long? And what's the basic preparation around actually being able to achieve such a thing?
I'll try and be succinct here. So the first question is to what inspires me and to do those kind of feats. I think it's twofold. One, it's my love of what I do in terms of loving swimming, loving the ocean, loving nature, and using the talent that I have to the best of my ability to protect it. As a Christian, I believe that it's my calling and mandate to look after the world and everything in it. And so that's my inspiration into doing the extreme things that I do. And the reason why I pick extreme things and I try and pick things that are undone before is to give me a bigger voice. It's the challenge. I love it. I love a challenge, but it's also, by doing something that extreme, it gives me a platform to speak about something that I'm passionate about, and that's around plastic pollution and conservation. And so the why and the drive into why I do it is the cause that I do it for. So I think that might answer your first question. And then the second question, in terms of preparation for that, it's years of preparation. I think I've been preparing it for my whole life. I mean, my whole career as a pool swimmer, with the time in the water and the hours and the discipline of training, gave me a really good platform and a good base. And then it was a transition into ocean swimming, which is very, very different. As you can imagine, in a pool, you've got controlled temperatures, it's a set distance, you've got lane ropes, you've got lane lines. It's a very controlled environment. Whereas in the ocean, it's very uncontrolled, and there's a lot that you can't control. So it's a big mind shift from being in a controlled environment and controlling what you do in that, to being in a very uncontrolled environment, and you can only control so much. So you can control your preparation and you can prepare yourself as much as you can. And in terms of my preparation, it was exposing myself to different conditions, from hot to cold to wild, to learning how to catch waves, learning how to read waves, exposing myself to marine life and interacting with sharks, and putting myself in situations in my preparation so that when I got onto the event, it was like I can be as prepared as I can be, but nature might still throw me a curveball. So there's still a lot of uncontrollables, but that's the appeal of it. But I mean, I'm quite methodical in my preparation. I spend hours preparing. Every swim we do, we learn from. And I have a very core team that helps me achieve these goals. It's not done in isolation. And my team are excellent at what they do, and I literally trust them with my life. So it's a huge element of trust within the team that helps make it possible. They're basically putting their hand up to say, listen, I'm taking responsibility for your safety out there. We're going into unknown situations in very uncontrolled environments, but we all have the same goal in terms of we love the ocean, we love what we do. Within the ocean, we have different strengths that we work well together with, and I'm really, really lucky that I've got my perfect team for what I do.
So let's just talk about the Easter Island swim, okay? So Easter Island, if you don't know, is a big island off Chile. Well, not such a big island. It's a very historic one. So it's off the coast of Chile. Now, you go there with a team, like you say. You've got a particular team that you trust and you work with. Just run us through some of the logistics as far as, is it a particular time of year that you choose? When you get there, are there certain kind of things that you take into account weather-wise? what is your sort of support crew look like? Is there a sort of boat that goes with you? Do you take stops? I mean, you were just over 19 hours in total to go around the island. What's the sort of basis that, obviously, in order to be deemed a world record, what are some of the things that you had to abide by in order to make this happen?
So for any kind of channel swim or ocean swim, if you want it to be ratified and recognized by the Open Water Swimming Association around the world, there's certain criteria that you have to follow. And the rules are that you're only allowed to wear a normal swimming costume, goggles and cap. You can't wear flippers. You're not allowed to touch the boat at any point. You have to start on land. You have to finish on land. And basically those are the standard rules. When you can't swim for 19 hours without eating and drinking. It's like trying to drive from here to Cape Town, Durban to Cape Town without petrol. You need to put fuel in the tank. So I have a support team which consists of a kayak who's with me the whole time, and they basically every hour they swap which side of me that they're on so that I'm breathing different sides, and their role is to guide me in the most efficient and safe way as possible to my destination. So they A, have to look out for currents and waves, but they B, also have to spot for jellyfish, for blue bottles, for sharks and marine life that could be a danger to me. And then the timing so I have a kayak, and with these swims, there are normally 2 or 3 guys that rotate, and they rotate every hour. So they swap, so that because their job is so important in terms of they have to be fully alert. I'm just putting my head in the water and following. It sounds pretty simple, but their job is to make sure that I get there safely. So they have to be alert and concentrated. So we rotate them so they're fresh and have rest. And then we've got a support boat on top of that, which trails behind in case of emergency. They carry all our food and supplies. On that support boat, I'll have an observer who has to take notes every hour on conditions, temperature, how I'm feeling, and they report that back to the Open Water Swimming Association. And then we've obviously got the skipper of the boat. He normally has the person who helps him or she. And then I've got my feeder and coach, and her job is to feed me every half an hour. And so when I get fed, they throw me food in a little Tupperware and a water bottle, and they chuck it on a piece of string and they throw it to me, and then I eat and drink, treading water, and then they reel it back in. So it's a bit like a fish. And then she will often get in the water with me as well, and swim with me when she knows or can see that I'm struggling or I'm just hitting a bit of a low point. And having someone in the water with you really does boost your energy levels. It's just you feel less alone. And then for the Easter Islands, and because it was such an extreme thing, and because of what happened to the guy before, the Navy of Chile also insisted on having their support boat on standby, because there's very few accessible places to the shore to evacuate safely. They had a fast boat available that if an emergency situation happened, I could pop onto there and they could immediately evacuate me. So there were quite a lot of logistics involved in terms of even getting permits to do the swim, getting permission to do the swim, involving the locals around it. We had a team of people from around the world. There were over 7 countries involved in making that swim possible. From our sponsors of Plastic Oceans, from our videographer who was from Latvia. We had America, Chile, the UK, South Africa. It was a massive team effort. And I think that's what people don't realize in terms of the logistics that go into a swim like this. We pulled it off in under 3 months. But it wasn't easy. In terms of the training, I had to put on weight. I put on 5 kilograms and 4% body fat in preparation for the swim in the extreme conditions. And obviously everything kind of had to align. In terms of weather windows, we had 2 weeks on the island, and we're hoping that within those 2 weeks we would get a window. So John, who's my kayaker and safety navigation officer, his job is to research the swims that we're going to do and figure out the best time of year, the best direction to swim, and looking at all those conditions. So he had a really tough job because there was really little information on Easter Island and swimming around it in terms of data. So he found the best weather window, and then I prepared according to that in terms of timing and that. And so when we got there, within the first 2 days there was an opening. And then that window closed already. So because of the trade winds, because of where Easter Island is situated in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, it's wild, it's exposed to the elements. You've got currents going one way, you've got waves crashing against cliffs and causing reverberation, and then you've got wind chop and wind swell. And when you're on an exposed part of the island, it gets very wild. So there was a very short window. We needed a minimum of 30 hours, or let's say 10 hours of one wind blowing for the one section of the island that I could safely get across. So that window closes rapidly, which we found when we got there. And then by day 5, a new window opened up, and luckily that window stayed open and allowed us to go and do the swim. And then I ended up finishing it in a faster time than anticipated, because I just wanted to get out, because the water was so much saltier than I had prepared for. It was like a chemical kind of taste, and it was just incredibly unpleasant. And that's one of the main things that made that swim so tough for me, was the salinity and the salt water. At one point, my throat actually started swelling up, and I struggled to breathe because of it. And then on top of that, it was just, on a lot of the long swims I do, you can switch off and zone out. But because of the nature of this swim, it was constant changing conditions. It was choppy, it was rough, it was bumpy. So there was never one point where I switched off. When I did the Hawaii swim from the two islands, I can probably remember 20 or 30% of that swim. There was a whole period where I just zoned out. And that's one of the beauties of these endurance events, is you can often zone out and you go into this other place. But that didn't happen on the swim, which also made it particularly hard.
Wow, again, I'm in absolute awe of that achievement. And like you say, just being able to zone out in itself is quite a skill. So in every single sport, people are nervous about certain things, or they have certain fears. Now, I know jellyfish is something that comes up a lot when I talk to endurance swimmers, anybody in the ocean. What are the kind of other things that do sort of play in your mind when you are on these things? Or do you just get to the point where you have so much trust in your crew that you are able to zone out in complete and utter trust, knowing that whatever's out there isn't really going to affect you?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to the point where I do have complete trust in them, and at the same time, like, for me, if I see a marine life, it's like a treat. So if I see a shark, it's like, woohoo, that's like a real privilege for me. Yes, at night, there's the danger element that you can't see what's coming for you, and you can't see things that might be there. But I actually love the night swimming. It comes with a sense of like peace and tranquility, which doesn't come in the daytime. So I actually really love it, and I don't let myself think about what might be there. I think that a lot of what we're doing is also trying to increase awareness around sharks and behavior, because there's so little known, and they're actually really shy creatures. And so, as I say, if I see one, it's a bonus, because it's a privilege to be in the ocean with them. But yes, jellyfish and blue bottles are still my worst fear. Yeah, I'm happy to take a sting. You know, I can deal with that. But the thing is, the more stings you get, the more you accumulate, and then you can have a more adverse reaction. But my biggest fear is actually not the elements per se. It's more if something happens to my crew or the boat that doesn't allow me to finish the swim. So then it's completely out of my control. I can kind of deal with, the elements being too wild, or getting stung or something, and that having to pull me out. But if something happens to the boat, that would really frustrate me, and that's sort of more of a fear for me than the elements and those kind of things.
Now, you obviously spoke about the deeper sort of meaning and deeper sort of cause behind these amazing feats. Breatheconservation.org. Tell us a bit more about this and why it is so important for you to have this in your life.
So Breathe is a non-profit organization that I started. Its aim is to eliminate throwaway plastic pollution. So basically to get rid of all plastic that is single use. And our goal is to try and inspire people to change their behavior by living deeply and treading lightly. So for me, that looks like using my talents and passion of swimming and my love of the ocean to protect it. And then on top of that, changing my daily consumer behavior so that I'm doing less to pollute the earth. And what Breathe does is we offer talks and workshops to schools and corporates. Our focus is more on schools because kids are the future. And just trying to inspire and educate on how to just choose one thing to change your behavior around plastic pollution. So it can be as simple as refusing a straw, or taking your own coffee cup to get coffee. Those small things that people think, oh, what difference is that going to make when everyone else is doing, taking a straw? But if everybody makes that one change, then it makes a big difference. So we focus a lot on education and just trying to inspire change rather than dictate it. And we collaborate with other like-minded organizations because together you can do more than alone. So we've partnered with Plastic Oceans International. We show their documentary at schools. Plastics Oceans actually are making a documentary of my swim around East Island, which will be another tool. John, my kayak guy, has written a book, which we're creating an educational toolkit to go with around the swim. So we're doing quite a lot of educational material, social media awareness, and then workshops and talks around that, along with reef cleanups, snorkel days underwater, cleaning the ocean, and then trying to get schools and corporates to be more sustainable. So you can check it more out on the website on all our little projects that we have.
Sarah, you sound like a completely tireless individual, and this is just over a brief conversation here and a little bit of research through your MatchKit profile. Now, 2020 has been a particularly trying year for you because not only has the whole COVID lockdown situation stopped you from traveling the world and obviously be able to make more of an impact, you had a very direct impact around COVID and obviously being diagnosed just before the lockdown here in South Africa. Tell us about how that really was for you from a physical kind of and mental kind of level, and how it's basically kind of maybe derailed some of your efforts in the short term.
Yeah, it's been a curveball for everyone around the world, which is really mind-blowing in itself. But yeah, I mean, I had a bumper year lined up. It was pretty much, I was doing a lot of traveling. I was launching my speaking career. I was going to go to Tokyo as a physio for the Olympics, which was a dream of mine. And then COVID hit. I got hit by COVID before we hit our lockdown in South Africa. And initially I was like, oh, wow, okay, I've got it. But I didn't really, I was like, okay, I'll be fine. I'll be fine after 2 weeks. And I wasn't. 3 weeks later, I still wasn't fine. I went back to the doctor, diagnosed with pneumonia and myocarditis, and then was off for another 6 weeks. So it was a long journey, and I'm still not 100% from that. And that's now 6 months down the line. I'm still not able to train to the level or capacity that I could do before. And it's been a frustrating journey at times, and at other times it's been a welcome relief. Like, I think initially it was like slow down and stop, and my body was grateful because I'd just been going non-stop for quite a while. And so the first 2 weeks was quite a relief. Obviously not feeling great, it didn't help, but I chose to use that time to focus on my organization and do stuff that I don't normally have time to do. I did a lot of reading, I did a lot of courses for physio and for Breathe, online workshops and that, and then started writing a book, which I'm hoping to finish one day. So I used the time positively. It's been a good time in terms of just being grounded and staying in one place for a while, focusing on developing my practice and building that again, and also just to build Breathe and make that a bit more sort of professional and sustainable, which has been good. So it's been a positive time despite the frustrations and not being able to do the things that we were planning. Like, all our plans and goals for the year with Breathe all got put on hold. We couldn't do any of our tuck shop projects. We couldn't do any of our cleanups. All the talks that I had lined up got cancelled and postponed. I was supposed to swim around Mauritius. That didn't happen. So all of that's kind of been postponed, and I don't know if we'll do them again, or, we're starting to start our projects again, which is exciting. And hopefully Tokyo will still go ahead next year and I'll get to go. But all of that's, none of it's guaranteed. So it's been a big setback. And as I say, I'm still trying to restore my energy levels and physical capacity to what it was before. But it's also been a positive thing because it's allowed me to just channel my energy elsewhere. So my brain is very active and full now. My body's just not doing what it could do before, but we'll get there. So yeah, but it is just, I guess everyone's had to learn how to readapt and adjust and learn how to kind of go with the flow.
MatchKit.co/Sarah Ferguson ZA. Now, if you go onto Sarah's MatchKit profile, it is one of our better ones, I've got to say. Sarah, you put a lot of work and effort into this. It does look fantastic. On here, you can access Sarah's store, where she's got some merchandise, obviously, in relation to her organization. You can also go onto her charity page and get involved with the cause that Sarah holds so dear. And as well, you can get in contact with her on her contact tab. Sarah is available for speaking engagements. As you can tell, this podcast could have been about an hour or maybe 2 hours long just to get into the logistics of what goes into all her sort of big feats and her big sort of swims. So if you are looking to book someone who's got incredible stories of inspiration, obviously just of meaning as well, I think we all need to take better care of our oceans and our natural environments in this world. And Sarah is obviously on the forefront of that with incredible insights and ways that you can actually make a difference by yourself. Sarah, thank you so much for your time today, and I wish you nothing but the best in your full recovery from the COVID, and of course nothing but the best of with your logistics and all these other big tasks that you're looking to take on.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate the time.
Cool. All the best.